A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. My name is Cam Edwards. On the program today, Stephen Gutowski of the Washington Free Beacon joins us. And I do want to let you know that we spoke with Stephen before news broke yesterday about the shooting at Saugus High School in Santa Clarita, California. So you will not hear us discuss that. But coming up on Monday's Bearing Arms Cam & Company, we are going to be talking about that shooting, about targeted school attacks in general. And, you know, it still bothers me, but I'm used to anti-gun politicians and activists exploiting these types of tragedies to call for, we need more gun control. They don't say what. In most cases, they don't say what, but they don't even wait for the facts to be known. They just seize on these tragedies before the names of the victims are even known, before the conditions are known. And they try to blame gun owners, or they blame the NRA, they blame anybody but the person who pulled the trigger, and claim that the answer is more gun control laws. And we saw a lot of that yesterday. I've gone into some detail at Bearing Arms Cam & Company about why I think that that's a really bad argument to make, particularly in a state like California, which has the most restrictive gun control laws in the nation, which has universal background checks, red flag laws, 10-day waiting period, one gun a month. You have to be 21 to buy a firearm, and dozens of other background checks on ammunition, micro-stamping, right? Basically any gun control law that you can think of, California has it on the books. It did not prevent this crime. Now, again, I'd like to see some pushback from the media when politicians bring up, universal background checks. I'd love to hear them ask, okay, well, California has that law. It didn't stop this crime. What do you say about that? We won't see it. But something else we didn't see yesterday was anybody in the media, in any of these anti-gun politicians and anti-gun activists, bring up a report that's just been released that is specifically all about targeted school attacks and how to stop them. Came out by the U.S. Secret Service, their National Threat Assessment Center. We've spoken to Ryan Petty, whose daughter Elena was murdered at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. He has been involved with this report and is now helping to train law enforcement and educators on how to identify these threats and get them help before they try to take as many lives as possible, and in many cases, try to take their own life as well. This was released. And according to this report, almost every one of these cases was preventable, and not through any gun control law, but through actually paying attention. Even in this case, the suspect's dad apparently passed away in 2017. There were quotes from friends saying, he hadn't been acting like himself in recent weeks. If we really want to stop these attacks, we're not going to do it by trying to ban our way to safety. And so on Monday's Bearing Arms Cam & Company, we are going to take a lot of time to actually look at this report offered by the National Threat Assessment Center. And I hope, I doubt it's going to happen, but I hope that these anti-gun politicians, these anti-gun activists, the folks who really do want to try to ban their way to safety, will listen to what the experts actually have to say. All right, now let's listen to what Stephen Gutowski has to say about those rise in NICS checks numbers that we saw in October for the, third month in a row, and much more. Take a look and listen. Stephen, it's good seeing you again, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Man, it's always my pleasure. And some good news that you recently reported on. In fact, I think earlier today you had the story that the NICS numbers for October are up compared to what they were back in 2018.
Yeah, that's right. Numbers for October were up 10% over last year. And it's actually continuing a recent trend. The last 3 months or so, we've seen a significant increase in background checks on firearm sales that over 2018. So things are, it seems, in the gun industry are trending upwards, which is a good sign for the industry, because it had been trending downwards since 2016. So now we're seeing that trend reverse.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, I mean, this is obviously nationwide, so we can I don't think we've seen in the October numbers any sort of impact from Virginia's elections, for example, although we can certainly talk about the surge in gun sales that I expect we'll see in the November NICS numbers. But what do you think is driving this recent increase in NICS numbers? And again, every NICS check does not equal a firearm purchased, but it does appear that the retail sales are improving. So what do you think is driving that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the numbers aren't one for one. There's no national registry of guns, so there's no like specific way to track every gun sale. The background checks are just the best approximation of that. They don't capture, a lot of used sales on the secondary market, or sales that are where you buy more than one gun on the same background check. Those happen as well. Or if you're in a state where your concealed carry license allows you to buy guns without going through NICS. So it's not a perfect capture, but it's certainly the best we have. And I would say that the spike is probably related to the politics of the moment, where you see Democrats running in the presidential primary and moving further and further left on gun control, with even having candidates who are openly pursuing gun confiscation now in Beto O'Rourke and Eric Swalwell, although obviously they had to drop out. It didn't work, but certainly that's still relatively unprecedented. It really is just unprecedented to see a candidate advocate for literal gun confiscation during a presidential primary. So
I mean, it really is, and it's sad when Bernie Sanders is the quote unquote pro-gun candidate for Democrats, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'd like to ban these guns, but confiscation that's a bridge too far." That is now what passes for moderation, among this crop of candidates, and I suspect that that is driving these sales. I mentioned what happened in Virginia with our elections. I was talking to my local gun store owner yesterday in Farmville, and the day after Election Day, he went online. He ended up buying 6 ARs from his distributor. They were gone before lunch. They were sold before, he could even get them in the store. Yesterday, I believe they ordered 15 ARs. They too already spoken for before any of them actually arrive in the store. He's really worried right now about being able to, keep stuff in stock because of the surge that he's seen just since the elections last week.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. Virginia obviously now will be completely controlled by Democrats, and they are following the national trend in the party in advocating for stricter gun control. Now, there is obviously an open question about exactly what Democrats will actually pursue when they get into the state house. They only have a 1-vote majority in the Senate, so it's not as though they have massive majorities, although they can move pretty much whatever they want as long as the party all agrees on it. So the key will be whether or not something like an assault weapons ban can actually garner full Democratic support in the Senate and House. And that remains to be seen, obviously. Whereas something like universal background checks or red flag laws is probably even more likely to pass. The assault weapons ban will still be, a major possibility for sure in Virginia.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be, I think, a pretty nightmare scenario for gun owners and Second Amendment supporters. I suspect even with that 1-vote majority in the state Senate, they're going to try to ram through as much as they can, because this is the first time in 26 years in Virginia that Democrats have controlled the governor's mansion, the attorney general's office, and both chambers of the legislature. Chances like this to remake the state don't come around but maybe once in a generation. And I think Democrats are going to try to take full advantage of that, even if it causes them some, electoral difficulties in the next statewide elections in 2021. And honestly, if you're an anti-gun politician who was just elected on the backs of millions of dollars in advertising from Michael Bloomberg's campaign, why wouldn't you go for as many gun control bills as you possibly can? Gun control advocates, I think, do feel emboldened right now in Virginia. And unfortunately, I think that they may have some reason to. I'm not sure that gun control was quite the election winner in every race that they thought it was, but clearly, the messaging and the amount of money that they were able to spend in these suburban swing districts, I think, unfortunately, it did have an impact.
Oh, yeah. I think that's very true. And there's certainly before the election, we've reached out at the Free Beacon to 17 sort of key Democrats running who'd gotten a lot of outside money from George Soros's group as well as Everytown, and asked them about the governor's previous plan to ban assault weapons, which included a confiscation element. And none of them responded to the request for comment, and none of them had listed support for that bill or that proposal on their website. So there's certainly is some question about exactly what these people are mandated to do once they get in. But I do think, obviously, that the amount of money put in by gun control groups over the last 3 elections in Virginia has been incredible, unprecedented in Virginia politics. And so certainly I think it's clear that they're going to try and satisfy that donor base once they get into the State House.
Yeah, and Ralph Northam may end up as Virginia's best gun salesman since Barack Obama. Again, we'll see what the numbers look like when they come out in early December. But, if this increase in gun purchases that we're seeing here, or even the increase in concealed carry applications, the increase in the NICS numbers, if this is being driven by politics, to me, that indicates that this is not going to subside anytime soon. As a matter of fact, we'll probably see it continue to ramp up as more Americans start to pay attention to the 2020 election cycle as the primaries start being held, as race really starts to take shape. I would expect that this trend would likely continue in 2020.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all. That is pretty traditional in America, at least in recent memory, where gun sales tend to jump based on political considerations. So I would not be at all surprised to see this trend continue into the election, especially with the state of the president's approval ratings. So, like, if people are especially concerned that the pro-gun candidate, in this case Donald Trump, will be more pro-gun than any of the Democrats. I mean, I think that's fairly obvious to anyone observing, regardless of how you feel about the president or the Democrats. And so if there's the perception that he could lose to a candidate that's going to pursue more gun control, then I think you will see that number creep up more and more as that perception gets stronger. And, it might lessen if the perception is that the president is going to win re-election, because I think, it's just natural to look at the sales numbers over the last few years and see that when President Obama was in office, sales, really skyrocketed over fears that the Democrats would pass some sort of new gun bans. They weren't able to do that, obviously. And then when President Trump took office and Republicans recaptured control of Congress, you saw sales decline. They didn't go back to the levels they were at before. They were still elevated compared to the historic norms, but you can see the effects that it has. And now that Democrats, now that we're going to another election, Democrats control the House and are passing gun control legislation, you're seeing the numbers go back up. And I think that's not a coincidence.
No, not at all. And you're right. I mean, the new normal is, in terms of NICS numbers, is a lot higher than what it was before Barack Obama took office. But there has been that decline. And I do think it's sort of a natural reaction when you feel like your rights are threatened. Oh my gosh, they're going to try to ban this firearm. Well, I might as well buy one now before they ban it, or pick up some magazines before they ban these magazines. I can't tell you how many gun owners I've had tell me over the last week or so, yeah, I got to go get more magazines, because they know that this magazine ban is coming. Which kind of brings us to another topic, and that is the compliance or the lack thereof with some of these laws. We were talking right before we did the interview about this story out of Colorado, where I think it was 9 News in Denver did this big investigation for November's sweeps, and they found that virtually every gun store that they went to are selling part kits for magazines, 20, 30 round magazines. And so you can assemble your magazine apparently legally in Colorado. There are some stores that are outright selling magazines that are supposed to be banned by law. It sounds like there's very little enforcement since 2013. I think there have been a total of 6 individuals that have faced jail time for possessing a magazine, and most of those, it sounds like, had underlying drug charges or violent crime charges as well. You look at what's going on in Colorado or New Jersey, and the fact that nobody handed over their magazines to state police, the compliance rates in New York State with the registration of so-called assault weapons. Even if gun control advocates can put these laws on the books, it seems like they're going to face a real challenge, and they are facing real challenges in terms of getting otherwise law-abiding Americans to comply.
Yeah, well, I think that leads to, I think everything you just said is 100% true, right? In New Jersey, the state police under FOIA admitted that they hadn't confiscated a single magazine in the entire state, when the estimates there are that there were millions of these magazines that were now banned when they lowered their capacity limit from 15 to 10, and that it became a felony to possess them at all. And nobody complied with it. Not a single person turned in a magazine to the state police in New Jersey. Colorado, very similar situation, right? And it's always funny to me with these laws, assault weapons bans or magazine bans, because it's, you got a group of legislators who generally don't understand the basics of the technology they're trying to regulate or ban. And so it's becomes very simple to get around the things that they're trying to get at. Okay, we'll ban magazines that have a capacity. You can't sell a magazine that has a capacity more than 10 rounds anymore. All right, can I sell you're going to ban the spring, a certain length of spring that goes into a magazine is a box made out of metal or plastic that has a spring inside it. That's all a magazine is. So the idea that you could ever sort of eradicate that technology from human understanding is just absurd. And then the other part of it is, as you've seen in New York and New Jersey and Colorado and California, a lot of times these are sort of feel-good laws, right? They aren't enforced. Nobody attempts to enforce them. It is, as you wrote in your piece, it is fairly shocking to see someone just say, I don't care about this law. Our sheriff's not going to enforce it, so we're just going to sell magazines that are illegal. And you could talk about the ethics of it or whatever, but the reality is, oftentimes these sorts of pieces of legislation dealing with gun control are just meant to be symbolic. They really are. They're just supposed to be, hey, we banned this bad thing, this thing we think is bad, and so now I guess nobody has them anymore. And it's just like, they don't think through it. Beto had the same thing when he was talking about, his confiscation proposal, right? He just sort of had this attitude that, if we make them illegal and we tell people they have to turn them in, everyone's just going to do it. But no, they're not. And then you get into, all right, well, we'll send the police. And it's like, but in reality, they don't even try to do that because it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sheer magnitude of trying to confiscate all of the magazines in Colorado or New Jersey or anywhere else, or all of the assault weapons or whatever class of firearms you're trying to get rid of in the whole country is just so absurd to think about. There's so many of them that there are more AR-15s estimated to be in civilian hands in the United States than there are all the firearms in the entire police force, all of the police forces in the entire country, by 16 times. How are you going to collect even that small? And ARs make up a substantial but not overwhelming number of the actual guns in the country, right?
Right.
There's more guns than there are people. There's 400 times as many civilian-owned firearms in the United States as there are police-owned firearms. 40 times as many civilian-owned firearms as the military has. Like, it's just...
You're right. It's a silly and simplistic argument. And when Beto, the thing that drove me nuts about Beto making that argument is here's a guy who's saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with this, but we need to decriminalize cannabis. We need to expunge people's records. I'm not sure about reparations for people who are arrested for low-level marijuana crimes, but whatever. Here's somebody who acknowledges, look, there's a law that a lot of people have disobeyed. Right? Non-violently, a non-violent offense, but they disobeyed this law. They got arrested. Beto thinks that's not fair because, gosh, that's a bad law. But by his own argument, he should know that there are going to be lots of people who don't obey dumb or bad laws, right? And when it came to cannabis, his attitude was, well, let's decriminalize it. When it came to firearm ownership, his attitude was, well, let's criminalize it. And expect that people will follow along. I don't know how on earth he thought that it would be any different than the large numbers of Americans who may smoke pot in violation of a federal law. Why people would all of a sudden decide, all right, yeah, you're right, my rights aren't that important to me. I think people are going to cling to their firearms a lot more closely than they're going to cling to their weed. Again,
plus,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, plus the same issues that you have with marijuana prohibition laws about how they disproportionately affect minorities,
yes,
or people, are true of gun laws as well. Like it's the same issues exist,
absolutely,
within both of these sorts of laws. So, it is rather remarkable when you see Democrats or anyone, Republicans. Perhaps go the other way, but you see Democrats say, "Oh, well, these prohibitions against marijuana are racist because they disproportionately affect minorities," which is like perhaps there's data that backs that up. The same can be said about a lot of the gun laws in our country, and the gun laws also have overtly racist histories too. Oftentimes, they were put in place with the intention of oppressing minorities. So, I mean. They just sort of ignore that history and those effects. Why that is, I don't know.
I think they ignore because they don't want to deal with it. Honestly, I really think it's as simple as that. Because they do want to ban guns. They don't like guns, and so even if it is this, I think really for a lot of them it comes down to that. And so they don't care necessarily about the hypocrisy on display. But I think you're exactly right. And next time we have you on, we'll talk about Michael Bloomberg running for president if he does decide to get in, because I think that's going to be one of the many reasons why Bloomberg's candidacy would not be a success, because he's on record in years past talking about throwing young minority men up against the wall and frisking them to take their guns away, making comments about young minority men shouldn't own firearms. I mean, I think that there is that very paternalistic attitude among certain sectors of the gun control movement, and I expect actually that's going to.
That's right. Some of them. I mean, certainly ones like Bloomberg have openly said these things in public. It's very troubling.
It is, and I suspect that in the 2020 election. Hopefully we'll be able to actually, you and I and gun owners and candidates will be able to actually talk about this, because one of the things that I was kind of disappointed by in Virginia is that Republicans did not have a strong enough pushback against that messaging that Republicans don't care about children. Republicans don't care about your family. They don't care about your kids. They're in the back pocket of the gun lobby. And I think we need to be doing a much better job as people who support the Second Amendment of pointing out the damage that's done, not only to, our individual right to keep and bear arms by a lot of these proposals, but the damage that is done in some of these high crime communities where, things get worse. Crime does not go down when these gun control laws are passed, but you may have, good people who live in a bad neighborhood who want to protect themselves, who now either can't or have to break the law in order to do so. We haven't had those types of discussions, I think, in the past. But I think going forward, rather than just shouting "shall not be infringed," which may not work, if people say, "Well, I want to infringe on your rights," I think we need to be able to approach some of these things from a perspective that some of our opponents may listen to, probably won't, but we may have a better chance of getting them to listen to some of these types of arguments.
Yeah, I mean, to me as a reporter, I feel like those are stories that go undercovered too, you know, and a lot of these voices get lost in the debate oftentimes, you know. So I agree that it's important for people to be able to hear those perspectives, right? People be able to make up their own minds. These people are certainly exist, right? These people who want to be able to legally own firearms in minority communities are certainly, there's many of them. And I don't think that they get the attention that they deserve.
I'm right there with you. All right, listen, before we let you go, you've got this really cool auction that's going up for charity. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so there's a celebrity auction from Homes for Our Troops. This is a charity that builds customized homes for wounded veterans. And so they put together an auction with all these really, huge big name A-list celebrities like Ben Stiller and Paul Rudd and a lot of news personalities as well. Jake Tapper and there's a bunch of Fox News shows that you can tour, and MSNBC as well. Chuck Todd show, Morning Joe, and then as a part of that, I'm also auctioning off a private basic pistol course for 2 people in the DC or Philadelphia areas. Whoever wants to take the course can bid on eBay, and hopefully you can share a link for that, or you can come to my social media, my Twitter, where I've also tweeted out the link to bid on the class. It is a basic pistol course, so it will in Virginia qualify for the training requirement for the concealed carry permit here. So when you go to apply, you send them the certificate that you get from taking the course with me, and you'll be qualified for the permit. It's a 6 to 8 hour course. There's live fire. We'll go to the range. It'll teach you not only how to safely handle a pistol, but also how to accurately fire one. All the fundamentals of shooting will be in there. Aiming, breath control, grip, trigger control, everything that it takes to learn how to accurately shoot a pistol will be in this course. It's the first time that I've offered a course publicly. I've been teaching the Free Beacon employees for several years now, but this is the very first time that I probably the only time too. So that I'm offering the course publicly. So it really is a unique experience. It's private training. One-on-one. 2 people can take it at a time, so you're getting a 2-for-1 sort of deal. So I think the price is at something like $200 right now. So that's a pretty good deal for this. Hopefully we can get it up a little bit higher, because all the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds, will go to charity. I will cover the costs of the range trip and the ammunition, and you can shoot my guns, like perhaps the 1911 or whatever you want. So that's what I'm offering up, and hopefully people will be generous and we can raise some money for a good cause.
That is awesome, man. And yes, you're right. $200, that's way too good a deal. All right, even $300, $400, this is a good deal. And with, as Stephen says, with every penny of this going to charity to help our veterans and to give them that incredible opportunity to get into the great outdoors, I think that is a very worthy endeavor. We'll certainly put a link up here after I put this interview to bed. We get it posted online. In the meantime, Stephen, so when does this auction end, first of all? I
believe it goes on for another week or so. So, not too much longer. You still have time now. So go ahead and go over there and bid. And hopefully, if you win, I look forward to showing you a good time and showing you how to be safe and accurate with a pistol. So
that is fantastic. Stephen Gutowski, always good talking with you, man. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know we'll be doing this again very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Stephen Gutowski with the Washington Free Beacon here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivism report, which comes from Virginia, fairly close actually to Farmville, Louisa County, where a 16-year-old broke into the home of an elderly couple, killed the 82-year-old man, left the 73-year-old wife for dead. He wanted to steal the couple's car, apparently, so he could go visit his girlfriend in college in Lynchburg, Virginia, about 90 miles away. According to this suspect's father, his son does have a previous criminal history. He describes his son as a good kid. We don't know what kind of previous criminal history he has, but we do know that he was on probation. Because dad says that he had been noticing over the past few weeks that his son was not acting right. And he said he reached out for help. He said he told the probation officer what was going on. Reached out to others. He said, can we, try to get him into some mental health treatment? Now, it'll be worth following up on whether or not that actually happened and what the response from the state was. Because again, here you have another case of a couple, one person's dead, another is in the hospital. And the teenage suspect, dad says there were warning signs. Dad says he reached out and sought help. Now, again, was the Virginia civil commitment law possibly used here? Or was it ignored? Was it ever approached by any probation officer or anybody else that dad reached out to? These are things that I guess we're going to have to wait and see. But, coming up here in early January, we're going to have lawmakers return to Richmond. And their answer to stopping crimes like this is going to be to make it harder for an 82-year-old and his 73-year-old wife to protect themselves in their home against a 16-year-old who illicitly acquired a sawed-off shotgun and wants to kill them so he can steal their car and go visit his girlfriend. They're going to focus on making it more difficult for legal gun owners to exercise their rights than they are to ensure that the juvenile justice system is working, that the mental health system is working, that the probation system is working. They're not going to focus on the actual individuals committing these acts of violence. Instead, they're going to focus on the intended victims of those violent criminals. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, speaking of people defending themselves, from Vermilion Parish, Louisiana. Not a lot of info here on this story, but we do know that a homeowner says man broke into his home. It was about 2:15 Thursday morning. He shot the intruder when he encountered him inside the home. Police arrived. So far, homeowner's story seems to check out. They did find the deceased individual inside the domicile. Homeowner's cooperating at this point. Looks like a clear-cut case of self-defense, but again, we don't have a ton of information. If we do get more details about this case, we'll bring them to you on a future Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Finally today, our good deed of the day from Detroit, Michigan, where an off-duty park ranger and a Border Patrol officer saving a suicidal man's life. It happened on Monday. Off-duty park ranger noticed a couple out on a bridge in a snowstorm, and so he walked over to see if he could be of any assistance. As he's talking to the woman, the Border Patrol officer sees what's going on. He comes over to try to be of assistance, and as he's walking up, the man who was there with his female friend shoves her and then tries to jump off the bridge. Border Patrol officer saw what was going on, was able to stop the man, hold him down with the help of the off-duty park ranger. They were able to subdue him and get him checked out at a local hospital for his own safety. So in the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing. We thank that off-duty park ranger, that on-duty Border Patrol officer in Detroit for their very good deeds. And that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Thank you for being a part of the program today. Again, make sure that you tune in on Monday as we go through this Secret Service report revealing the real answers on how to prevent these targeted school attacks. Also, don't forget, you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page. And you can also subscribe and be a VIP member of Bearing Arms as well, where you will get exclusive content, as well as editors' chats on a regular basis with myself. We certainly do appreciate your support. And we will see you Monday with a brand new edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for spreading the word.